All right. Hello, everybody. We're back at it with the Summit podcast. I've got a great guest here for you today. His name's Chris Felton. Before we do that, I always like to talk a little bit about our sponsors and kind of jokingly say, the job that I'm supposed to be doing when I'm podcasting is owning and operating Turner Builders here in Southern Maine. We do remodeling and we do large scale renovations. We do bathrooms, kitchens, all that kind of stuff. Anything attached to a house, I like to say we can handle it. So check us out online at www.turnerbuildersllc.com. I also own and operate Summit Coaching and Consulting. So I've got a whole bunch of different things going on. And part of that is running this Summit podcast. And I'm starting to run into some really great people. And just this past week, Chris Felton and I ran into each other kind of in a mutual group that we're part of. And he said, "Hey, you got a podcast?" I'm like, "Yeah." And I look for guests. So here we are. But Chris is a speaker, founder, and Amazon best-selling author. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. Seven-figure entrepreneur. He's got his own financial services company, started in 1999. He's helped thousands of people, just help get them educated and avoid some financial pitfalls in life. He's the author of Think and Grow You. Okay. He's been featured in the Milet Financial Group, U.S. News, NASDAQ, Yahoo Finance, and Market Watch. So, Chris, you're a pretty big deal here.
I'm a legend. I'm a legend in my own mind, Bob.
Well, I was going to read that whole intro, and that we'd still be going if I kept reading it. But I'll let you take it for a minute and just kind of tell us a little about yourself and what's going on. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, I'm in Colorado. I'm a Colorado native, and grew up 60 miles north of Denver in Loveland, Colorado, and went to Colorado State University and got an accounting degree, and I moved down to Denver in 1993, so I'm 51, and climbed the corporate ladder for 7 years, and then looked to the guy that was 10 years ahead of me, and he was on his fourth marriage, and he was a hot dog away from his next coronary, and and his kids hated him, and I was like, oh my God, that's going to be me. And so I basically realized I had to be an entrepreneur. And so kind of moonlighted, worked 70 hours a week as a CPA and moonlighted as a financial services entrepreneur for, 6 to 10 hours a week. And then went full time a year after that and kissed corporate America goodbye in February 2000 and have grown that business into to 200 licensed agents. We got about 30,000 clients all over the United States. And then went through a pretty expensive and painful divorce in 2004. My kids were 7 and 4, and they moved to Atlanta with their mom. And then I met my second and last wife, Marlo. And what she didn't realize, Bob, is she was walking into a financial train wreck. And I was $250,000 in credit card debt.
Wow.
I was a financial services entrepreneur in the middle of the Great Recession. I had a 6,000 square foot office lease that was stupid that I couldn't afford. And I'm paying my ex-wife $5,200 at the beginning of the month. You can probably do all the math here. Alimony and child support. And so my turning point I'm getting to that kind of transformed my world was I was out of money. And I was out of options, and I had to pay my ex-wife the next day the $5,200. And so I had to come home and basically ask my wife, because she was a good saver. She had money separate from our marriage because she knew, she was smart enough not to commingle money with a broke dude, right? And
Right.
and so we're in our rented house now because it's getting really bad. And so I have to come home and I corner my wife in the kitchen and I'm like, hey, I need some money.
Wow.
And so I had to convince my wife to give me her money to pay my ex-wife. And
That must be love.
It's pretty funny now, right? And I'm like, hey, I'm your soulmate. And come on, you said you'd do anything for me. And we're a team. And I turned my head for 1 second, Bob, and I hear a woof, and her 20-pound purse. You know how big women's purses are, right? It's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
This 20-pound purse flies over my head, and she threw her purse at me and spilled everything everywhere, and then she picked it up, Bob, and she threw it again. She picked it up, and she threw it again. She threw it again. And we had the fight of our lives, and I was like, well, why are we still together? Like, I'm confused.
Right.
And that ended the fight, and she went upstairs to figure that out for the rest of the night. And I was there alone with my thoughts, and I'm like, there's a common theme to all my problems here. My kids not seeing me, my ex-wife, my first failed marriage, financial problems, stressing my wife, I'm drinking too much, and I realized that I was the common denominator to all of it. And I realized right then and there that I had to change. And I took 100% responsibility for the mess. And the next day, my wife and I got back together, and we can talk more details after that. But we got back together and decided to stay together and not declare bankruptcy, not get jobs, stay in our business, and figured it out. And we did. And we had a massive transformation financially. And
that was quite a low point.
Yeah. We wrote a book called Couples Money from that. And anyway, but that I always kind of tell that story because that kind of sets up the rest of the talk. Is I think people are feeling that way, and probably more than ever. And there's a path out of it.
What while you were talking, it made me wonder. Like, I've talked to a few people, and whether it's in my coaching or just in business or whatever, they might have a spouse that says to them, "Hey, why don't you get a real job?" And that, if you've punched. I always talk about this on the podcast. If you're punching the time clock and you're working for the man, somebody else is deciding what you're making and when you get to go on vacation. If somebody doesn't beat you to the calendar and all that. That's a different mindset than the entrepreneurial journey, right? That's full of potholes and pitfalls and ups and downs and staring at the ceiling and crying yourself to sleep and all the blood, sweat, and tears. But when you're at a low point like that, when, the easier thing to do might be say, hey, I'll just go back and, get a real job. How do you resist that and just stay true to yourself and stay on that entrepreneurial track?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, and it's actually a chapter in my book. It's called "Quitter's Relief is a Lie," and I was pretty fortunate that my wife realized that I call it just getting really clear on your ideal life, and then in that moment of decision, you have a choice to make, and you can either stay the path or do what most people do, Bob. As you know, they quit, they give up. And my chapter that follows that, Quitter's Relief chapter, is called Don't Retreat. And I actually had an entrepreneur reach out to me today, and he's like, dude, holy cow. Oh, my God, did I need to read that? Because I was thinking about Quitter's Relief. I've been retreating. And the way I lay it out in that is I did a couple things, Bob. My wife and I sat down and we said, what do we really, 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 really want? And we got super clear about what we wanted. And you're a coach, and knowing what you want, and you need to know what you want, is one of the most beat up topics in personal growth and development. But almost nobody knows what they want because it requires you to actually think. So right. What we had to do is we had to re-up and ask, what do we really, really want? And most importantly, what are we hoping to feel? Because everything we do in life, we're hoping to get a feeling. And we just said we wanted financial independence. We wanted financial freedom. And we spent hours. Why? Why does it matter? Why do we care? And we realized that getting a job was never going to get us what we wanted.
Right.
And our biggest fear isn't fear of failure, it's fear of regrets. And so I don't want to get to the end of my life going, I arrived safely at death. And it's an article I read when I started my entrepreneurial business. It was the USA Today. It's like 2001, Bob. They interviewed 10,000 people over the age of 80. And they said, if you had to do it all over again, what would you have done differently? It was heartbreaking.
Hmm.
I would have started that business. I would have done this. I would have done that. So we re-upped on what we wanted and why we wanted it, and we reminded ourselves. And then the second thing is I called my mentors and talked them through what I was scared of and what I was fearful of, and they're like, "Yep, it sucks, but quitting's going to be way worse."
Right.
So associations, those are the two things we did right.
Well, I get into your book a little bit, and again, we just connected here a short time ago. But I wanted to try to I always try to get as prepared for these as I can. So I was kind of going through your book, and I was gonna skim it, and then I said, "You don't skim this book." I started reading it. I just got engrossed in it. And one of the things that I saw was one of the things I can't quite remember how you exactly said it, but the fact that we're most productive between 50 and 80.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of get to 50 and you have that mortality set in. And, oh, geez, what have I done? What's my legacy? What am I going to do? How is this going to go? I'm over half done. But I think your point was most people crank it up between 50 and 80 and quite productive between 60 and 70.
Yeah. I mean, the chapter's called "You're Too Young to Be Old," and
Right.
and just the story in there is, when I turned 50, I was like, that's the first time I realized I wasn't getting out of this thing alive. And that was like the
Right.
first time I'm like, dude, you're gonna die. Not, before that I was like, everybody dies but me, and
Right.
and now I'm like, and so anyway, I was depressed for a bit, and then I have an angel in my business that just sends me stuff when I need it. So phenomenal. And she sent me this study, and it was like, yeah, your most productive years, your most productive time period, 60 to 70. Your second is 70 to 80. Your third most productive is 50 to 60.
Yeah, it's
And,
interesting.
yeah. And I read that and I got energized, and then I just started sharing that with everybody, and it transformed them. And so I like that message because I think, I was talking to one of my buddies. I mean, he's a very successful, mutual fund manager, very wealthy. We were talking months ago, and we're talking on the phone. He's getting ready to leave his firm, and he just started sounding old, Bob. He's like, well, Chris, I don't know anymore what I'm going to do with my life. And I'm like, dude, shut the hell up. So I sent that study over to him. I'm like, read that, call me back.
Yeah.
And it's like I shaved like 20 years, or I added 20 years to his life. He's like, oh, I'm not just a washed up POS. I'm like, no, dude, you got a lot to contribute. So quit with that paradigm of you're over the hill, whatever.
Yeah, it's funny because I've been quoted as saying in the last 3 months, geez, I feel like I'm kind of late to this game where I'm just kind of getting fired up to coach and help people. But you got to get a little bit long in the tooth, so to speak, before you've got all the relatable experience to be able to pass on to people, right?
Yeah, I mean you're on fire. North of 50. I mean, I actually feel better now than I did in my 30s because of a lot of stuff I talk about in the book. I mean, I know
Yeah,
who I am. I don't care what others think. I mean, I care about people, but I don't care what they think. I mean, I don't have a lot of
right.
what I call energy leaks of resentment and all that stuff. So I
Yeah, you
feel
kind of
better
get
than
by
ever.
that, don't you?
Yeah.
Kind of just like, yeah, whatever. I'm not going to worry about that.
Yeah.
Getting back to the book, I mean, your subtitle mentions how to get out of your own way. It's a big part of the book, and I did skim through it. What do you mean by getting out of your own way?
Yeah. So, we as humans, Bob, I mean, one of my favorite quotes in that book is we're a miracle and a mess at the same time, right? And
Yeah,
so we all have these self-sabotaging patterns, and, we're often hypnotic robots.
right.
91% of our thoughts a day are the same as they were yesterday. And so to change your life, you got to change your thoughts. And so we have these things that happen to us, and we have a similar reaction, similar thought, similar feeling, similar action, similar result. Bill Murray, Groundhog Day personified.
Yeah,
And it's just, that's how we stay stuck, whether it's worry or judgment or deservingness issues or whatever. I mean, it's a laundry list. So the front part of the book, that whole pillar is just about, there's 5 pillars. It's just all about recognizing the pattern, right? For me, it's like, okay, this is how I screw myself over, right? So,
Yeah.
so when it happens, instead of going down that rabbit hole again, having awareness, not fixing it, but the next pillar is shifting it, right?
Right.
What do I do to shift, to have a different thought, to feeling, different action, different result? So just get out of our own way. Choose
Yeah, I think
something
that's
different.
probably
Yeah.
then the biggest part for me, I guess, would be that just the self-awareness, like kind of taking a step back and say, geez, how did I handle that situation? Or how am I showing up? Or, what kind of, father, son, friend, business owner, or employee or whatever am I being? And am I being the best one that I can be? It seems like the past few years, blame it on COVID, blame it on whatever you want.
Sure.
Everybody's been stuck. What are some things people can do to get unstuck? And I'll often say, don't try to boil the ocean. Don't try to do it all at once. But if there were 1 or 2 or 3 things that you could share that, if somebody's just feeling like they're just running in quicksand, what do they do?
Yeah, it's and COVID was, it's horrific and just horrible what happened. The quicker we can get to acceptance, the better. And what creates stuck is resistance to what's happening. And what resistance is, Bob, is what is happening shouldn't be happening. Well, it is,
Right.
and I had, I had a few bad days during COVID, like when it went down, and I'm financial services, and my clients' accounts are down 30%, and
Oh, yeah.
and there was a ton of fear, and the media was stirring up the pot, and but I've also been here back in '08 and all that, and so I knew how I felt, and because I didn't feel good, I knew I was resisting what was happening, right? Fear, doubt, and worry.
Yep.
And I also know that to try to create anything new from that standpoint, it's not going to work. And so the tools I share in the book, I had to let go, and it took, a couple days, and release my fear, release my worry, release, all the tools I share in the book, to get to the point where it was like, okay, it sucks, but as my coach would often say, you don't need to love it, but you need to stop hating it. And accept. So it sucked, but it is what it was. And then our whole company pivoted immediately to Zoom and online. And we had a record 2020.
You just figured out what you needed to do and did it.
Yeah, we had a record year in 2020.
Wow.
So, but once I released fear, doubt, and worry, and said, okay, yeah, this is real, this is legit, but I'm gonna bring my A game. I'm gonna serve people. I'm gonna accept it, and I'm gonna move forward from acceptance. So, and it's part of what I talk about in the book is write down everything in your life that you wish was not there. Great exercise.
Yeah.
And anything that shows up on that list, you're resisting it. And anything that shows up on that list, often when I do this in my workshop, those things on that list, Bob, have been there a really freaking long time. And because people continue to resist it, it continues to persist.
Right.
And persist. Anyway, so that's a powerful exercise.
I want to go back to the writing real quick, because you talk a lot in the book about journaling, and in your chapters, the way it's laid out is, I have an action item, and many times it's journaling. And one of the things that I read was that you kind of, on one of your low points, kind of holed up in a coffee shop for 5 hours and just wrote. Tell me more about that. And you like literally just went down, sat down, and got real granular and real honest with yourself. And what came of that? Was that when kind of the book started, or? Or just a
Well,
turning point for you?
no, that was probably one of my first like big awakenings. I mean, the book didn't come till many years after that, and there was still
Yep.
pain to ensue, but it was an exercise that I got from a very wealthy entrepreneur, and before he doesn't. Beginning of the year, he doesn't like do goal setting. He asked the question,
Hmm.
"What's holding me back?" And he divulged that to me, for months.
Yep.
So he would start there and write this big list of that's basically how I get my own way. What's holding me back? And I had 8 client appointments that canceled in one day. It's never happened before. And my tendency would have been to go to the bar and drink the rest of the
Mm.
afternoon.
Yeah, a lot of people would.
Yeah, but instead I trusted my intuition, and I went to a bookstore, and I wrote "What's holding me back" at the top, and I stayed there for 5 hours, man. And it was, I hit the snooze button 4 times every morning. I don't figure out what I'm going to wear the night before, so I jack around wasting time doing that. Some pretty like dark stuff that was really holding me back. I was drinking too much. So it was a big list, but it was really empowering because it was like the first time I was actually really honest with myself. And I think I say in the book, I'd finally met the enemy, Bob, and it was it was me.
Yeah, that sounds like that was kind of your turning point right there, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, yeah, I mean the real turning point was my wife threatening to walk out the door if
Dodging
we
the
didn't figure.
dodging the
Yeah,
purse.
dodging the purse, but that was really a first step of me like taking myself on for the very first time in my early 30s. So for sure it was a big moment.
Yeah, but I like that term, taking yourself on. You have to get really real with yourself, right? And be honest.
Yeah, yeah. Otherwise, the term I use in the book is you live in hopium. All right,
Okay, I
you're
like
you're
that. Yeah,
you're hoping everything in the outside changes while you
yeah,
insist on staying the same. It's not a good
yeah,
formula.
yeah. One of the quotes is be willing to change, do the work, it's worth it. Um, can you speak on that for a minute?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of my whole positioning through the book. I mean that's really what all the
Yeah.
stories are about is, and I've added a piece to that sense, but it's we need to we need to humble down, and that's tough. It's often tough for guys to do, all right, because we don't like to feel that we're doing anything wrong.
Right.
Um,
Got all
we're
the
we
answers.
Yeah, we don't like to be told we're not doing things right,
Yep.
but we got to humble down. And so that moment of my wife upstairs figuring out should she stay or should she go, I had to humble down, because as my coach
Yeah.
used to say, Bob, and you can use this in your coaching practice, it's my least favorite question, but it would snap me out of my egoic need to be right. Hey, Chris, based on results, how's your way working?
Yeah. The term I've heard a lot is, "Hey, how's that working for you?"
Yeah, but he'd say
Yeah.
based on your results in your life right now, buddy, how's that working for you? And then he would just smile at me, and he'd wake me up, and I'm like, not very good. So he'd get me back into humility and coachability, and then we have to be willing to change, and it's not optional
Yeah.
because we're either growing or dying, and the masses are addicted to comfort. And
This is
I
true.
start I start the book with one of my favorite quotes from Jeff Shore: "A life spent seeking comfort results in an entirely uncomfortable existence."
Hmm.
And we saw that in spades with the pandemic. People were addicted to comfort, and stuff went down, and they weren't ready,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And then you got to do the work, man. You got to do the work. But then the last thing is, uh, you got to know it's going to be worth it. And most people really struggle with that. And I had that as an asset. I knew that
Yeah.
if I put in the work, it would pan out. I just needed to make sure that I planted the seeds in the farm and I didn't move the farm, which is what a lot of people do. So,
Well, it can take time, and it's not always fun. And it can be ugly. It's not always pretty. Um, you had some points about how to use a coach effectively. You've talked about your coach. I'm doing some coaching. There'll be some people that are watching this that are considering hiring a coach, whether it's on the personal side or business or however. What are some really effective ways to utilize a coach, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, and I hired a coach, for 4.5 years who was, he was where I wanted to be. He was financially free. He worked because he wanted to, not because he had to, and he just had a lot of wealth in all areas of his life. And I spent a lot of time putting up a front that it wasn't that bad, right? And
You weren't coming clean.
yeah, I mean, I did a
Yeah.
little bit, but like there's a chapter in the book called "Your Need to Be Right Will Cost You Your Life." Like I waste a lot of time trying to be right
Hmm.
in all areas of my life, which didn't work too well, especially not with my first marriage. But I was kind of doing it with him, and then we had a coaching session every Friday, and it was he's the first 6 months, Bob. He had to like dig out of me what was going on,
Right.
and we wasted so much freaking time. And he would just ask me the same stuff. And then finally I just woke up. I'm like, why don't I just get to the point?
Yeah. Just
And
tell them.
the number one skill of a world class performer is what's called objective reality. And objective reality is the capacity to look at your results unemotionally and own your results.
Hmm.
And so it's the number one skill of a world class performer is the objective reality. And most people are delusional, right?
Yeah. When they start to look inward, they're not looking through the same set of glasses, right?
Yeah, well, and we have to avoid being deluded because it's easy as
Yeah.
humans to be delusional. So anyway, so I just said screw it. So we 6 months in, we got on the call, and I said, "All right, coach, here you go. Let's do this differently. This is what I said I was going to do last week when we talked. I didn't do it. Here's what became more important than me keeping my word. Okay. However, this is what I learned. This is what I'm going to do different. Will you still coach me?" And he about fell over.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did, and I'll repeat it again. This is what I said I was going to do. I didn't do it. So you either say you did or you didn't.
Right.
Here's what became more important than me keeping my word. And people are like, I want to be successful, Chris. What do I need to do? Keep your word.
Yeah.
Do what you say you're going to do. Then we'll talk about everything else. However, here's what I learned. Here's what I'm going to do different this next week. Will you still coach me? And so for the next 4 years, that's what we did. And then finally after the 4, he's like, I think you got it. I don't think you need me right now. I
Right.
think you got it. You're able to self-coach a lot. I mean, I still have a lot of coaches in my life, but anyway. But that's powerful. That's a powerful tool for other coaches out there to use that sequencing of questions.
Yeah. I
Gets right to
like
the
that.
get
And
to
I,
heart.
I,
Gets right to the heart of it.
I think our job really as a coach too is to try to get a person to the point where they no longer need you, right?
Yep.
Work yourself out of a job.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, talk to me about writing the book. I've heard talked to a lot of guys that writing books, and it kind of it definitely gives you a platform from which to jump, whether it's in the personal development space or whether it's financial services or whatever it is that you're somebody might be doing. But you've got this book. How long did it take you to write it?
Um, it took about 16 months.
Wow.
But I had a coach. Steve Siebold wrote the foreword. So Steve's a
Hmm.
personal development legend. He's sold 3 million books, made $50 million in speaking fees. He's a friend.
Wow.
So he reached out to me in November 2021. He said, "Chris, I've heard you speak for years. Time to write a book, but I'm going to
Right.
teach you how to write it. I'm going to teach you how to write it." And so it's going to be your content, but I'm going to teach you. There's not going to be a word out of place. There's not going to be it's going to flow. It's going to be simple. He's like, Chris, I've done 4,000 or 5,000 book signings in my life, and the word that people get from my book is simple. And we need to bleed this thing out. And he said, he's like, if I had to go back and rewrite my books, I would add a personal story to everything I taught. I didn't do that, but we're not going to make that mistake with your book. So we actually wrote the stories first, Bob, and then I created the content from the stories. And most people do it in reverse. So anyway, we took 9 months on the first draft. Steve spent 25 hours on the fourth draft. So there's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of programs. Write a book in 30 days. Stupid. Don't get a ghostwriter. If you're listening to this, don't shoot me if you're a ghostwriter. He's like, dude, you need to sit down and you need to write it, because stuff's going to come to you that only comes to you when you're writing. It's going to be out there for the rest of your life. We got to make sure that the damn thing is impeccable. And we need to slow down. And it was some of the best advice I've ever gotten.
Yeah, I've often thought, I joke with the guys that either on the job sites or wherever, I'm going to write a book someday about this business, because some of the funny things that happen, but also the lessons learned along the way, I think could be of value at some point. So that's something that's been kind of rattling around in my head for a while. But maybe I'll just sit down and just start kind of making an outline and seeing if there's anything there,
Yeah, just write what he had me do, actually, for the first 2 months. Just write my personal history. Yeah. It's powerful. Yeah. Just write your personal you get it all out there, and then what'll happen, Bob, is when you write your personal history, you'll see your stories in there.
Right.
And then you pull out the stories, and then you can write the content around it. And so you just start writing. So I just started writing 20, 30 minutes a day, first thing in the morning, set it aside, didn't put pressure on myself.
I heard you mention you'd written another one, right? You and your wife?
Yeah, we wrote a book called Couples Money. Yeah, that was 2011 we published that.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Would you write another one?
If as I said, I sent this book to my chairman of our firm. I was like, God, is he even going to pick it up? And he read it 3 days, and he said, why'd you write it? I'm like, God put it on my heart. So like it was really I had to do it. I had to get it out, and even all the stuff I've been doing with the book launch and all this stuff, like Bob, I've never lost enthusiasm for the project.
That's cool.
So I'll write it. I'll write the next one if I get the same vibe.
Yeah, that's cool. And we're both over 50. I'm a couple of years ahead of you, but to hear you say that you've never lost, your energy for it or your passion for it is pretty cool. One of the things that I jotted down and you and I were talking about is the term "don't settle." That's one of the things you've said, tell me a little bit more about that and how, if somebody's thinking about settling or, oftentimes people are like, close enough's good enough, or hey, I make this much. It's okay. I only need to make this much to get by. What's the difference between somebody like that and an entrepreneur that's like, hey, how much could I make?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's and settling can happen. I've watched a lot of people in my company, just hit grand slams financially, and they get everything they ever need, and they just retreat and they settle, and I call it looking for love in all the wrong places. I mean, they're trying to find it in stuff, and they're just not fulfilled. And you need two things to be fulfilled. You need to be growing, absolute must, and you have to be in service to other people. And so you'll never find it any other way. So our ego wants to tell us that, just come back, just pull back, just chill. Now, do I have fun? Yeah. Are there times when I chill? Yes. Did I need to rest over the last 16 months doing this thing? Yeah, but you're never more on fire than when you're chasing something down. And, the analogy I give is, what's the afternoon after Christmas morning versus the lead up to Christmas morning? Right?
Yeah, big letdown, right? Yeah, sure.
There's a big letdown. So you're always, and actually the dopamine hits come when you're on the path, when you're going after. It's not actually even, and so you'll never find joy in settling. You'll never find joy in like, yeah, I don't need that or whatever. And so you gotta be after it, man. You gotta be growing yourself. You gotta be contributing to others. That's where the juice of life is. And unfortunately, the masses look for it in comfort, and it is a futile search. You will never find what you're looking for.
One of the things, that's great stuff right there. One of the things that I've noticed, and and it's just been kind of my way over the past couple of years, and maybe it's probably people would argue that I've always been this way, but just try to be of service to others, right? And it kind of started with me when I would write a blog, or that we started this podcast, and I would just I found myself getting on the phone with guys in the contracting group, and they would just ask me questions. Hey, how do I deal with this tough conversation? Or when's the right time to hire or fire? Or how to deal with this tough customer? And I found myself just constantly pushing out, right? And all of a sudden it kind of started to come back. And by way of, additional clients or increased income or just weird stuff, weird, good stuff that was happening all year. Like, seems like every week this year, something really good has happened. And the only thing I can attribute it to is just being in service or being of service to others, and just saying, hey, how can I help you the most? And starting questions like that. And it just seems like it's kind of flooded back. Have you ever felt that way?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's, I think, as Earl Nightingale, like, you don't go to the fireplace that's got no wood in it and you just hold your hands out saying, "Give me heat," right? You need to provide it. You need to give the wood to the fireplace, right? To get the heat. So, to start the flow, you always have to be thinking about it, right? I mean, it's a chapter in my book. It's called "Be a Giver," and and most people are like, well, if I give, is it really going to work? And it's a law. So what you're experiencing is it's a natural law. You can count on it. It's a law of prosperity. It's just like any law of gravity. So yeah, I mean, anytime my business isn't where it needs to be, I'm like, something's got to give, and I have to give, and just getting intentional about what can I do? What can I do to add value today? All good. What can I do to add value today? Is the question.
Sometimes it's just that simple, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, there was another question I was going to ask you. Lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me. I was going to add that there's two kinds of people: givers and takers. The takers eat better, and the givers sleep better, right? But I was just looking at my list here, and the dog barked, and it knocked me off my game. It'll come back to me. But this has been great. I appreciate you coming on and doing this and getting to know you. I got a sneaking suspicion you and I are going to be talking some more in the future. And then banging some things around, because I think you're a few laps ahead of me, and sometimes that's those are the kind of people you want to kind of hitch your wagon to. So I see you and I maybe expanding this relationship a little bit in the future.
Yeah, of course, man. Yeah, for sure.
You talk about wrestling with your ego a little bit, backing up to what we had before, and one of the things that I've always tried to do, particularly on a job site, if I go on with my contracting business, I always say, hey guys, leave your ego in the truck. And everything gets pretty simple after that, right? Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, your ego is not your amigo. So
right.
Yeah, it's and that's a big part of self-awareness. It's just and I don't have it all figured out. I'm not a guru. I have not arrived, and but that egos need to keep us right where we are and stuck and sabotaging ourselves and all that. Like that's an infinite game. We'll never be done with it. But if we can interrupt the egoic slip before we go down the mountain and slide all the way down, it's gonna save a lot of relationships and give us a lot more peace and joy.
Yeah, what would you say to somebody that's thinking about just kind of diving into this personal development space, just for the purpose of just becoming better at some things? I mean, I know that people on the outside are like, hey, I'm good. I don't have to worry about that. I'm all right. But, when they stop and think about it, they're like, there's probably some things I could get better at. What would you say to somebody that's kind of teetering on the edge of saying, well, maybe I should get a coach, or maybe I should actually just chat with somebody about this?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to be sick to get better is, one of the things that comes to mind. And if you really understand that you have to be intentional about growing yourself, you just can't chill. And chilling sounds great, right. but it's like I said, life is such a paradox, right? And so, and that's why I wrote the book. Is my book hits people from all different levels, whether they're just starting, right, or they're seasoned in this path. That's why I did it. Is people? It'll meet people wherever they are, but start small. Okay, I need to get up. I talk about morning routines. That's a beat up topic in personal growth and development. But right. Have you ever been discouraged, Bob?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Several times a day at times.
Yeah. Well, and what I talk about is, as much as people think I have this all dialed in, I'm human, man. And often when I wake up, like this morning, I was a little discouraged. It just woke up that way. And so to have our dream life, we have to be encouraged.
Right.
And I've watched discouragement wreck more people's lives, wreck my dad's life. I've watched it wreck more lives than anything. And so in the past, I would just get discouraged and fly out of the house and go about my day discouraged. Well, what am I going to find? I'm going to find what I'm looking for. I'm going to find other ways to be discouraged. So I quit watching the news. I quit watching TV. But then I had this uninterrupted time in the morning where encouragement is like a gas tank. And I have to fill the tank every morning, whether that's, I'm a Christian. I read my Bible. I visualize. I image. I do all sorts of cool things to get myself energized. And so if you're new to personal growth and development, get a coach. Highly recommend it. We all have blind spots. We need someone other than us. But I would give yourself 30 minutes of uninterrupted time, even if it's just sitting in silence without your phone, right? I call it the weapon of mass distraction that we have.
We all got it.
We all got it. And just read a little bit, meditate on it, sit in silence 30 minutes a day, compound it over your lifetime. You're going to grow whether you want to or not, and you will enjoy the fruits of planting those seeds.
It's funny. You mentioned kind of I'll paraphrase, but you get more of what you focus on, right? That's one of the things I've picked up, and I like that, and I always say that. And I've been really kind of digging into manifestation, right? Like, hey, I really want this to happen. I'm going to focus just on that. I'm not going to focus on what if it doesn't happen. What are your thoughts on manifestation and that statement? You get more of what you focus on.
Well, I mean, the preeminent law of all personal growth and development is what's called the law of growth, and it's that. It is, what am I focused on? And one of my favorite questions that I ask myself frequently, often when I don't feel well emotionally, is ask myself, what am I focused on and what must this be creating? Mm. And so you are manifesting all the time.
Right.
Right? It's whether you're manifesting the stuff that's serving you or you're manifesting the stuff that isn't serving you. So the law of attraction is real. It's legit. It's not woo-woo. There's scientific data to back it up. Einstein talked about it. Jesus talked about it in the Bible. He was the ultimate metaphysician, and it's been around since the beginning of time. So it's a law like gravity. So, my coach is like, it's a law, buddy. Maybe you should line yourself up with the law, right?
Right. Yeah, and what a good feeling it is to think, well, hey, listen, if I just focus and focus and focus on that, and I really start believing that, and I really picture myself doing that, then stepping into it almost starts to become a reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty cool.
It works.
Yeah.
It works. And, one of my things is it doesn't work overnight, but it doesn't happen overnight, but it will happen over time. It will happen over time.
Exactly.
Trust it.
Yeah, I just started reading John Wooden's book, Coach 'Em Way Up. I listened to Lynn Guerin and Jason Lavin a couple weeks back out in San Diego at a contractor event. I was fortunate to meet those guys. And one of the things that Coach Wooden talks about is the definition of success, or Lynn talks about that definition of success. I'll put you on the spot. What's your definition of success?
My definition of success is, right now it's impact.
I like it.
And the more, and I wrote the book, and it hit me, I want to impact tens of millions of people in a positive, powerful way. That's impact's the word that hit me, when I turned 50, and it's still with me today.
Dude, you're just getting started.
Yep. God's got big plans for me. God's got big plans for me.
This is going to be fun to watch, and I'm excited to have connected with you. Usually, as we kind of wrap things up, I always say to somebody, "Hey, listen, the floor's yours." More and more people are watching this all the time. We've just gotten started, so we got a small audience, but we're looking for world domination as well. So, but if you could share something with everybody, what would be the one thing that you would like to share?
Yeah, to just wrap up, like you got to be intentional about the growth and the contribution and service to others, and that's where the true juice of life is. I think the big message, if I had to go back in time and talk to my late 20s self when I started as an entrepreneur, I would have told myself to chill out and relax.
Be patient.
Well, relax and enjoy the process, enjoy the journey, and it's a chapter in my book is trust. It's going to be okay, right? It's going to be okay, and relax. And Bob Proctor is one of my heroes, and he called it calm urgency. Yeah, and there's a lot of power in being urgent but calm.
Verdict said aggressive patience too. Recently, I heard that term, which is kind of very similar. But yeah, well, good stuff. Super pumped to have connected with you and just have a chance to talk a little bit. Most of my podcasts have been in person because we've done local stuff, but I'm liking this. This is allowing me to kind of reach out across the country. You're in Colorado, which is super cool. We're in southern Maine here, so it's been fun to connect. So. How do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, just my website, chrisfelton.me. So my main mode of operation is the book, keynote speaking and workshops, and the book is written in such a way that literally people can pull out whatever concept they want me to come speak to their group on, and they can do the same, and we can create custom tailored keynote talks that fit their audience, as well as workshops, whatever. So that's why we set it up the way we set it up, and I'm excited to get out and do some of that.
No, it's fantastic. Guys, it's called Think and Grow You. He's Chris Felton. It's already an Amazon bestseller, which is super cool. Been fun to have you on. I really appreciate it. I look up to you in a lot of ways already because I like to find people who are already doing stuff that I like to do. So this is awesome for me. I appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much for being here, Chris. Thanks.
Yeah, Bob, grateful to meet you. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care. We'll see you.
You too, brother.